Hello! Welcome to Natalie and Company. I am Natalie and you are the company that I do like to keep. Long time no see. I work at a bookstore and it's just been really great. I've really enjoyed it. I've also been really busy because of it. Oh, but man, did I try. Okay, I tried to film a video in October and actually for the last half of September. I spent the past 6 weeks trying with everything in my power to find a 5-star thriller. Unfortunately, I failed and I wasn't able to do it no matter how many I read. How many did I read? I literally read 8 different mystery thriller novels and none of them were 5s. I did read some that I liked, but I hated all of the clips that I had filmed, so I just kind of threw them away. I'm trying to be forgiving to myself. The fact that the video I spent the last 6 weeks on didn't really work out, but here we are to give you guys a wrap up of what I read this October and the couple of thrillers that I read in the end of September, just to give it a good number. Over the past 6 weeks, I have read 11 books. 2 of them for my own pleasure, 1 of them for book club, and then the 8 from the thriller video that will never see the light of day. Let's go through this thriller journey. We're gonna do it in the order that I read them in, and we're going to relive the horrors that was trying to find a 5-star thriller mystery. First thing that I read, Reappearance of Rachel Price. The Reappearance of Rachel Price is a book about a little girl who at like 6 months old, so she doesn't even remember, her mother goes missing, and then 15 or 20 years later her mother reappears, and when she truly thought that her mother was dead, and it becomes this whole mystery game of like, you're alive, like, so where have you been, and unraveling the mystery of her mother. This book was very long. I picked this up because I really loved the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I thought that they were really well done. They were like kind of anti-police and I was like, oh yeah. But this one, again, I like the anti-police vibes that are in it because it's definitely like the police like aren't going to do anything to help you here. But this was just, it was longer than it needed to be, and while it did in the end, as things finally came together, I thought that the resolution to the mystery is great. There were some plot twists that I didn't see coming, but it just took so long to get there. There were so many details about things. There's like a scene where one of the characters like steals the phone of another character to go, and it just takes page after page after page. I think my neighbor is vacuuming, so sorry if you can hear that. It just felt like things that had been, there was just so much focus on things that didn't really matter, and I think in a thriller it's so important to, like, a thriller mystery is so important that like your things that don't really matter should have a reason for being there, and it didn't feel like that in this book. And I also think if these unnecessary parts had been, condensed down, it would have given the book a little more room to breathe with its like tension and the emotion it was trying to evoke with the way the relationships were playing out. So I just think that it was almost a little too much, like just doing too much in a description way. But I do think the mystery was great. I thought that the mystery was very well thought out. I thought all the pieces that Holly Jackson presents you with in the book, and the way that she does it, make it really difficult to solve on your own, but she definitely presents you all of the pieces, which I think is one of the things that makes me enjoy mystery, is that if I have all of the pieces and I still don't figure it out, then that is where I get really impressed. And that's kind of what happened here. So by the end, I was very much impressed with how they all came together, because the vision wasn't clear to me until the reveal happened. And that was very enjoyable. Pretty good, just still wasn't as good as A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The mystery in that is better, so 3.75. Then I read next The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. And I think, unlike a lot of people, I was fine with this. It definitely, The Paris Apartment by her is still my favorite of her novels that I've read. But again, I really quite enjoyed this one. As somebody who, you know, as we're going to see, has a hard time with thrillers, I felt that The Midnight Feast was fairly deep and progressive and talked a lot about like the indigenous people's connection to land, because The Midnight Feast is the story of an old mansion that was converted into a luxury resort, and it's the opening weekend of this resort happening, and the locals are not happy about it. They're not pleased. None of them, you know, all of the supplies that are going to the luxury resort are being flown in, and they're not local. The resort is pushing these people out of their land and out of their forest. Thriller story about this woman who, how do I even describe the plot of this book? About this woman who attends the opening of this resort. We find she has nefarious purposes. Oh my god, I literally can't tell you more than that without like spoiling something. But I thought that it was really good, and I honestly, that like more that I thought on it, the more that I enjoyed it, which I think sometimes is not always what happens for thrillers with me, because then the more that I think on it, the more I'm like, oh, but what is this, and why did this happen, and that doesn't work here, and things like that. So when I can continue to think on a thriller and the mystery and it still holds up, then that kind of pushes it forward for me. So I gave that one a 4. I really did enjoy that. Like I said, at the time I gave The Paris Apartment a 4, but I think, like, thinking back, that's a 5 for me, and I honestly think that that brings my total thriller 5-star count up to 3. The Paris Apartment, The Riding Retreat, and In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I did think about picking up Ashley Winstead's other book for this. I didn't end up doing it because I fell into a deep dark pit of despair that I would never find a thriller that would fulfill me. So I gave up instead. Next, I picked up another great one that I very much enjoyed, Everybody in My Family Has Killed Somebody by Benjamin Stevenson. And this was great. It was just such a fun time. I am a big whodunit fan. It's very Agatha Christie in its format, and I'm a big fan of things like that. Cheesy but not too cheesy, fun but not too unserious, considering that it's a murder mystery. Lighthearted mysteries, or funny mysteries, or silly mysteries, or cozy mysteries aren't normally my thing, but this one I think really does the balance well and brings things all together in a great way that I really enjoyed. Everybody at My Family Has Killed Somebody is about a family on a family reunion, and things go awry because one of the family members is being released from prison, and that's why they're having the family reunion. Big shocker, another one of the family members is the reason that that family member was in prison. So it's like the whole thing. You get really into the family drama of it. I do think like some characters were fleshed out better than others, and at some points, like, book is set from the like voice of the main protagonist and like his internal voice, and he's almost like breaking the fourth wall and speaking to you. And I think in that there does come some rambly bits that I would lose focus in. This one was one that I had to kind of like keep going back because I was listening to the audiobook. I had to keep going back and re-listening to some parts because I was just losing the train of thought, and I was like, what are they talking about again? So maybe that was an audiobook issue, so maybe it would be better in a paper format. But like, I really enjoyed the mystery, I enjoyed the journey, I enjoyed the process. I wasn't as emotionally connected to all of the characters as I need to be for it to be a 5, unfortunately. I promise I wasn't trying to be difficult. everything was just falling short of like what I need for a 5-star to be, you know. But I did give it a 4. So I really shouldn't take away from the fact that there were books that I got to read that I enjoyed this month. So I didn't strike out on everything, just on quite a few things. After Everybody in My Family Has Killed Somebody, I picked up First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. And this was probably, honestly, yeah, this was probably my biggest win of all of the thrillers that I've read recently, which I was surprised at. And I keep being surprised by books with neon green font. I don't know what it is. It just immediately turns me off to the book. But I have immensely enjoyed a plethora of ones that have the neon green writing on the front, which I think is interesting. First Lie Wins is about a woman who is a thief, and in like a professional thief, like a stealing millions of dollars or paintings and things like that thief. And after messing up her previous job, she has been tasked to get into a relationship with her target and bring as much information about him as possible. And it devolves from there when this woman, this thief, begins having feelings for the target that she has been. I think the summary of it sounds horrible, and I literally thought that I was going to hate it because I also think that the summary sounds horrible. It sounds weird and it sounds cheesy and it sounds kind of out there, but honestly it wasn't. The main character was so smart, like in a legitimate way, not in a like the author says they're smart and so we have to believe that they're smart way, in a way that like is consistently proven throughout the book. Like she outsmarts all the people that she's around and does it by creating positive relationships. And I thought that it was just so brilliant. Each of the, like, it's very heist novel-y without being an actual heist novel. There are scenes that are like that, but it's like more about like identity and where the line begins and ends of like who you are as a person when you are faking things or lying all the time. And I honestly felt like it was just so enjoyable. It was so fun. And this was another one where I genuinely did not know what to expect to happen. This was the one I probably read the fastest. I read this in like 2 days because I just could not put it down. It was super enjoyable. It was super quick, and despite the pacing of it being super fast, I felt like there was so much of the character building and so much of the world building. The reason it didn't get to 5, right, was because literally the last line in the entire book, and I'm sad about it because this was not the only thriller that this happened with, where the final line in the book ruined it for me. I'm gonna try and be as least spoilery about this as possible, but there is probably, you would consider, light spoilers for the very end. So skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear it. In First Lie Wins, this main character spends the whole book talking about how much damage this life of lying and deception has done to her life, to the relationships she's tried to form, to other people. She's watched it destroy other people's lives. And in talking about that and spending the whole time talking about that, very end of the book, she submits to the system that she criticized the entire time. She plays into it. She doesn't dismantle it, if you will. Felt very antithetical to her character, and I was like, it just didn't make sense for her to spend this entire book talking about the damage that all of these things have done, and then to submit to the system that had done harm to her and to the people that she cared about. And so it left just like this horrible taste in my mouth as I shut the book. Like, and that was the final impression that I had of it. And despite how much I enjoyed the mystery, I just like will never forget that part of it now. Like I said, that wasn't the only one that happened with, but that was my first encounter with it. And so that was First Lie Wins. After First Lie Wins, I picked up one that you would probably say is a horror novel, not a mystery thriller, but there's a mystery in it and blah blah blah. So I counted it. horror movie by Paul Tremblay. This is my first ever Paul Tremblay, and after watching some of Books with Lala's videos about him, I think this was the worst one of his books to start with. I absolutely hated it. Horror movie is a book about an indie movie that was filmed in the 80s. There's the present timeline, which is the guy who was the monster in the movie in the 80s, and he is going on set to do the filming of a remake. Basically, this actor that is in this remake is the only actor that is left alive that worked on that movie, and you spend the whole book trying to figure out what happened on the original set and why things happened. I hated the beginning, I hated the middle, I hated the end. I hated the reading experience despite the ideas and themes presented in it being very, very interesting and intriguing. It doesn't matter how interesting and intriguing they were because the execution was dragged out so horribly for me. In a book that's literally like 150 pages. Like, the book is so short. The audiobook was like 7 hours, and within that time frame, I just felt like still like the introduction was so dragged out. It took so long for anything to go anywhere. And then again, just like First Light Wins, the very last chapter of this one, more than just a line, really was, I was just like, okay, so you throw away the rest of your story for the sake of a crazy ending? That's what it really feels like. And I was even reading on Reddit, like, some people were agreeing with me, so I know I'm not crazy. There's so much in horror movie about like the monster in humans and how easy it is for people to do harm. You don't have to be a monster in order to harm others and harm the people that are around you. If you don't actively try and fight against this harm, it's easy to fall into it. And then the last chapter, it just kind of like did away with all of those themes, with all of those ideas and those thoughts that it was posing. It was completely horrible. Like, it just completely trashed everything that the rest of the book had wanted you to ponder on, and I thought it was dumb. So I ended up giving this a 2. I want to be like Books with Lala so badly that when I didn't like this, I was really sad, actually. She's just so cool. But I just hated it. I didn't like this book at all. It's absolutely my least favorite on this list. I read The Current Internet Starling, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer. Honestly, I give it a 2.5. And I feel like you're all going to be really mad at me for that because that's why I picked it up. All I have been hearing is just rave reviews for this, and I absolutely hated it. We Used to Live Here is about a lesbian couple who move into an old Victorian house. They're house flippers, and then a family shows up on their doorstep being like, and the father's like, I grew up here as a child, can we come in and check out the place? And they come in, one of the kids goes missing, and things just really devolve from there in a very rapid pace. And maybe this is a petty 2.5, but I'm so angry at this book and how everybody loves it because there's no ending. There's literally no ending to this book. This was just so unsatisfying to me in a way that I was like legitimately mad that I had spent my time on it. I hope that there's a second one, because if there's a second one, I will reevaluate my opinion of the first one, because I feel like they would have to go in tandem in order to really flesh out the story, because the beginning is so amazing. It's so it's like a great horror introduction. It's a great character introduction. It is unnerving and it's intriguing and it's interesting and mysterious. Like all of these amazing great things and all of these philosophical ideas and horrific concepts represented, that nothing is done with them. They're all basically brushed away with. Not in the way that it was in horror movie. That it was like a rising action moment that ended the book. And not like a conclusion action that ended the book. And because of that, I just felt like the mystery was so skewed. It was just so condensed into literally the last like 2 minutes of a 14-hour audiobook. Like, where were the answers to the questions? I am so mad because I have so many questions that I want answers to, that I want understand. Without that understanding, like, I think that the best horror is horror that you can understand and is still terrifying, because obviously mystery is terrifying. Obviously the unknown is scary, right? So when you can make it known and it's still scary, to me that's what's really scary. Nothing about this haunted house that we used to live here is known at any point in the book. Nothing is confirmed, and because of this, it can't be as scary to me. There are no definite rules in which this house presides in. There is no rules or confines for me to be scared within. And I was so frustrated when I finished it because I had such high hopes. Oh man, I'm really mad because everybody said that this was the same thing as House of Leaves, and I get it because it's about a house that changes and like is haunted in some way, but it's completely different in the fact that there's literally no ending for We Used to Live Here. There's no resolution, whereas in House of Leaves, it's scary because of the resolution, because of what happens at the end of the book. Like, there are so many layers, and the fear of House of Leaves is continually proven no matter how much you know about the House of Leaves. Whereas in We Used to Live Here, the more I learned about it without real explanation or weight being given to it, the less it was terrifying to me. So that by the end of the book, I was like, okay, fine, okay, now that's what we're doing here, now that's what's happening. And then it ended, and then it was over. And like, before I had even finished processing the like final moments of it as well. Like, and so that is how I gave We Used to Live Here a 2.5. Please, everybody, advocate for this book in the comments, because I hated it and I wanted to like it so bad, and I just didn't. As like a person who literally, one of my favorite things in horror is when space is played with. I hated it. I hated the ending of it. I just felt like none of it even mattered. None of it mattered. I spent 14 hours on an audiobook just for none of it to matter in the end. Love to hate this book less, and I hope that a second book comes out so that I can. After We Used to Live Here, I picked up The Last House on Needless Street, which I did very immensely enjoy, actually. The Last House on Needless Street is the story of a man who lives on Needless Street, a woman who is searching for the kidnapper of her childhood sister, and a cat. The cat is the most reliable narrator, and even then, none of the narrators are that reliable. Still just a 4, because I didn't again evoke enough emotion within me. Although I did think that it was super well done. I think that it subverts the expectations a lot in this one. Expectations of horror, expectations of villainry, it really plays with the average expectations of a reader, and so I think because of that it reads very uniquely. The pacing is a bit slow for me personally. Definitely more so like a 3.75 than a 4, just because like by the end I had all of these great thoughts and ideas, and it was very interesting to listen to, and I liked her author's note that she had at the end, but the connection between me and the book itself just wasn't there for me. After The Last House on Needless Street, I picked up The Lion Game by Ruth Ware. I thought maybe because I liked Lucy Foley, because she was a bigger name in thrillers, I would like another bigger name. So I decided to pick up The Lion Game, and it was fine. It was fine. It was a quick and easy read, but I did guess like 95% of the twist. I guessed like less than halfway through it, and then the last 5% honestly was like a detail that didn't really have any bearing or change that much of the perception of the story for me. So like the twist was like, aha, got you, it was actually this, and like not really like an impactful part that I didn't guess. And so it was a little predictable. It was very average and about what you would expect for the story that was set up there, in all honesty. So just gave it a 3. It's not like I didn't enjoy my time with it, it wasn't anything special, and that was when I gave up. That was where my thrillers ended. I was tired of reading it, and so I picked up a couple things for the end of the month instead. As you can see, I've read all of these past books on audiobook, and all the books I'm about to talk to I have on physical, because these ones are ones that I've actually had on my TBR. First thing I read after reading a bunch of thrillers was Talk to Me, an Arctic horror anthology written by natives from the Arctic. This I absolutely loved. I gave 1, 2, 3, 5 stars, 1, 2, 3, 4 stars, and 2 3 stars. I felt like the stories in here were just so clean and succinct. Sometimes horror is portrayed as needing a really long time to be instilled within you, but this was like injecting the fear like straight into your veins. It's like immediately high octane, immediately high stakes, immediately there is scary elements and personal terrors and high concept ideas that are being thrown at you from every angle. The only comment that I do have about it is the longest story in here, Lounge, is also my least favorite one. It's way more science fiction than horror, I would say, and so much so that it feels disruptive to the environment and ambiance of the rest of the stories. I think it feels very out of place among the collection, and it was also my least favorite, partly for that, but also partly because it was very dense for a short story. There was a lot of just like lore that was being front loaded onto you about these like scientific things that they're doing and the way the lab that they were in works, and I thought that it was very disruptive to the straight shot of scares that the rest of the stories held within them. And that is the longest story in the entire collection, so that's the one that takes the most effort to get through, but I thought that the rest of them were supremely well done, and I enjoyed them immensely. Second to last, I read Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, finally picking up this classic because of book club. I am part of this book club if you are ever interested. We have fun, pretty small, but I think that we've been able to pick a really great variety of things that we've read recently, and our next book that we are reading is Never Whistle at Night, the Native American anthology. This honestly was not what I expected it to be. I didn't enjoy it as much as I was expecting to. I do very much love vampires, but this guy just wanted to fuck the 5-year-old way too much for me to truly enjoy and immerse myself into it. I think it was definitely a abnormal focal point to the extent in which it was represented in this book, but also like I understand, like it was the time or whatever, but that just made the reading experience overall less enjoyable for me. For this, I'd probably go to about a 3.75. In book club, we talked a lot about the different themes of like the history of how vampires have been represented and things like that, and to me it seemed as if Anne Rice wanted to represent that like humanity in and of itself is not inherently good. Humanity has many good and bad traits, and in order to humanize these vampires, she very much so had to give them both good and bad traits. And in doing so, I think that's kind of where some of the creepiness of the main character comes from. I've also heard that this second and third books, The Vampire Lestat and the one that comes after that, are way more fun and enjoyable. So honestly, maybe I will continue with this series, especially because I am a vampire lover. Might be worth picking up, maybe if I can find something that matches how beautiful this cover is. I really loved Anne Rice's descriptions. The descriptions that she had of the settings were so soulful. Then there's this quote. There's this moment where the main character, who's a vampire, is traveling across the ocean, and he looks out into the Mediterranean Sea, and he just sees darkness because he's a vampire, so he can't be out in the day. I wanted those waters to be blue, and they were not. They were the nighttime waters, and how I suffered then, straining to remember the seas that a young man's untutored senses had taken for granted, that an undisciplined memory had let slip away for eternity. The Mediterranean was black. Black off the coast of Italy, black off the coast of Greece. Black always, black when, in the small cold hours before dawn, as even Claudia slept, wary of her books and the meager fare that caution allowed her vampire hunger, I lowered a lantern down through the rising vapor until the fire blazed right over the lapping waters, and nothing came to light on that heaving surface but the light itself. The reflection of that beam traveled constant with me, a steady eye which seemed to fix on me from the depths and say, "Louis, your quest is for darkness only. This sea is not your sea. The myths of men are not your myths. Men's treasures are not yours." Those, I felt like some of the plot was definitely kind of like dragging and falling behind. There wasn't a lot to carry it along, and transportation by which these beautiful and philosophical quotes got to you, they felt like intermissions between strangely paced plot points. And I also hear that she like retcons things and changes things in later series, and I have like a hard time with things like that. I have like a hard time adjusting my schema for the story world, and so I don't know how I would feel about that, but I am definitely intrigued. And if I can find a good copy that intrigues me of the Vampire Lestat, then maybe 3.5 stars. Pretty basic, honestly. Not my favorite vampire representation. Still, A Dowry of Blood takes the cake. I have a feeling Dracula will be up there when I actually get a chance to pick it up, but a classic. You know, can never go wrong with picking up a classic and learning about the impact that it's had on history. And the final book that I read for October, Dark Tales by Shirley Jackson. This is just a collection of dark tales, scary stories written by Shirley Jackson and collected. And I love this cover. It's amazing. Oh, Shirley Jackson, how I love you. Shirley Jackson is absolutely one of my favorite authors of all time. I think that she evokes such a mundane horror that is so hard to beat. The things that stare you in the face in her stories are not monsters. They are the reality of the human condition and the fears that are innately woven into those things. And I think because of that, it makes so much more terrifying and so much more impactful, just like lasting. I remember so vividly the first time that I ever read The Lottery was in the 5th grade, and we read it aloud as a class. I just like have never forgotten that moment because of how impactful the concepts, and how like even in the 5th grade I just immediately understood the fear. I immediately understood the points that she was trying to make about mob mentality and following the crowd, also about society. Like I just like, it felt like my little brain was just like imploding, and ever since then everything that I've read from her has just been woven with this very detailed and deep understanding of what it means to be human and the things that are legitimately scary about being human. It's not the fictional vampire coming through your window that's going to destroy you. It is the paranoia of your neighbor, or it is the malaligned action of your bus driver. Like, it is so intriguing to ponder on. Like, legitimately, any one of these you could spend so long giving just analyses of. I think I definitely enjoyed Talk to Me more because the imagery was more evocative in that one, whereas in this one it is the concepts, the ideas that are being presented, and the themes that are more evocative. And so I have spent a little more time pondering on this one, while my like actual level of enjoyment was probably a little higher for Talk to Me. And I do think that they were scary for the most part, but I think that sets a very like high expectation of like fear, when I think mostly Shirley Jackson's stories are just unsettling in a way that unsettles small parts of your life. And that is everything that we have for today. That has been everything that I read for October. I'm really close to hitting my reading goal. I'm like 9 books away from it, and I think I'm going to be able to knock that out of the park, because the TBR that I have cooked up for nonfiction November is legitimately ridiculous and absolutely unfeasible for me, but I'm going to continue to live in bliss for the next month and tell myself that I can do it, because I can do anything that I put my little brain to. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for keeping me company here at Natalie and Company. I always appreciate it. I will see you soon with a nonfiction November video. Thanks and good night.